Hi, I'm James, and I was born legally blind, and I can edit video, such as this one. How did we get here? Let's take it a little trip back, and let's talk about the history of assistive technology. This topic was a lot of fun to research because I got to learn where a lot of the technology that I use today originated from. If you want to support myself and videos like this, please consider hitting the like button, subscribe, and make sure notifications are turned on. At the same time, if you want to go a little bit further, you can follow me over on Instagram, Twitter, etc. So keep in mind, I'll be mainly looking at assistive technology that's for myself, people who are blind, low vision, legally blind, within that spectrum of blindness, because it's just what I can speak to best and kind of give my own personal take on. Now, of course, all types of assistive technology is around and been around for centuries, and that's a much more deeper dive. To keep this video simple, we're going to be talking about 3 different time periods: the foundation period, the establishment period, as well as the empowerment period. So starting off with the foundation period. This is really before the 1900s. A lot of disabled people were recognizing that they wanted more access to different parts of life. Now, I'm sure this has been a desire for a long time, but the way that people were seeing people with disabilities wasn't great in the 1800s, for sure. Probably wasn't great further. And we have a lot of work to do even now, today. But that's why I'm here, trying to help you see different. So throughout the 1800s, many schools were popping up for individuals with specific disabilities. There were schools for the deaf, schools for the blind. One of these schools was the Royal Institute for Blind Youth. This also happens to be the school where the inventor Braille got his education. Louis Braille was born in 1809, and he was not born blind. In fact, he didn't go blind until he was about 5 years old, and it was really due to an accident in his father's tool shed. As tragic as that sounds, I think he went blind for a good reason, and that was he was the inventor of Braille. He thought very progressively, even for a time like in the 1800s. He really believed that disabled people should have access to communication, to literature, to all these things. When Louis Braille was attending the Royal Institute for the Blind Youth, he began to realize that what they were teaching him was limiting. They were learning a method of reading that frankly did not allow for much writing. In fact, the people that ran the school who were sighted had full control on what they learn, how they learn, and frankly, Louis Braille was not about that. He wanted access to the world, not just what he was being fed. So around 15 years old, Louis Braille invented the reading and the writing system of Braille. This was basically a 6-dot system, and you fill in these different dots, right? And they're textured, so you learn what each letter or character number is based on how they're filled in. It was a lot easier to write with Braille than it was with the method that they were learning. This allowed for blind people to then communicate, to exchange ideas, to foster new innovative ways of thinking. Louis Braille was highly respected within the school, but of course the headmaster and staff were very resistant. In fact, not tolerant at all of trying to change the way of teaching and thinking. In fact, he was so respected that he was brought on as a professor, and he spent his final years teaching at the school. But it wouldn't be until 2 years after his death in 1852, and in fact, Braille would start to catch on. Louis Braille was once quoted to saying, I don't have it memorized, so I'm like, Siri, can you put?
Access to communication in the widest sense is access to knowledge, and that is vitally important for us if we, the blind, are not to go on being despised or patronized by condescending sighted people. We do not need pity, nor do we need to be reminded we are vulnerable. We must be treated as equals, and communication is the way this can be brought about.
I absolutely love this quote because I still very much think and live by this today. And this was in the first half of the 1800s. People with disabilities, disabled people, blind people, deaf people, people with physical limitations, whatever it may be, deserve human rights. And we deserve access, which I believe is a fundamental human right. This is a society that wasn't made for us. In fact, oftentimes rejected and ignored despite the number of people who need to take in and share information in different ways. And if we can just be a little bit more understanding and open to that, I think the world can become a much more innovative and inclusive place. Moving on, a few decades after Louis Braille's death, in 1892, Frank Hall would create the first Braille typewriter. I mentioned one of these in my last video, and again, same resource down below, Tommy Edison, the blind film critic, blind YouTuber as well. He has an incredible video to show how those work. He used them in school. I did not. I've never really touched one of those before, so Check it out if you want to learn about what a Braille typewriter is. So that was one of the key things about the foundation period, was really setting up the foundation of communication, education, schools, the ways that we write and read and intake information. And that's what leads us into the establishment period, which really is during the first half of the 1900s. It was around this time that attitudes towards people with disabilities started shifting. Now, this could be for a few reasons, but really medical advances allowed for people to continue going about their lives, to continue going about their day-to-day. Now, though I don't use Braille, I use a white cane, and I think it's behind me. I don't know. I don't have my white cane in my hand to find my white cane. But a photographer at the time, James Biggs, he ended up going blind. Having gone blind later in life, Biggs was quite nervous around traffic. It was something that he was trying to get used to, how to navigate that. And he was afraid of incoming traffic potentially causing an accident. So what he did was he took his cane and he ended up painting it white so that sighted people were more aware of his presence and that he was visually impaired. Thus, the white cane movement would unfold. There are all types of canes out there for people who are blind, and one of these is the Hoover cane. The Hoover cane was intended to improve the quality of life for soldiers who had gone blind during the World War II. So, war's the answer to advancing technology. We're gonna move on. During the Great Depression in the United States, the Social Security Act was introduced in 1935. Data shows that about 75% of people who are blind are actually unemployed. Now, this does not necessarily reflect the amount of people who are blind who don't want to work. This is simply that a lot of blind people can't find jobs. They can't find employers who are willing to hire a person who's blind, whether it's stigmas or unwilling to look into the right resources to actually accommodate people who are blind or low vision. And of course, I wouldn't hire a blind person to be a truck driver. But again, there are so many skills that people who are blind and low vision have that just aren't utilized. Anyway, the Social Security Act, as flawed as that system is internally, externally, it is a lifeline for many people who are blind and low vision, who are trying to get by, who need resources, who need to buy assistive technology, who need to buy things like rides, right, for transportation. It very much is a lifeline. It's very limiting, it's very flawed, and I think there are better solutions that need to be done. But in 1963, South Carolina passed Title 10, Chapter 5, Article 3, access codes for architectural buildings. Pretty much it took until 1963 for government to be like, hey, disabled people, blind people, they're people who probably would like to come in here and participate in local government. Maybe go to the library, the post office, essential things. It was really around the early 1900s where we saw a lot of nonprofit organizations and charities really start to pop up to really help lobby and advocate for the inclusion of people with disabilities. And that leads us all into the empowerment period, the later half of the 1900s. This is when people with disabilities really started to want to pursue life goals and dreams with the advancements of not only technology, but law. I know every country looks different, but this is around the time when a lot of legislations began to be passed. For instance, here in the United States, 3 key acts were introduced: the Rehabilitation Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, and Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. In the 1970s, more devices began being invented, such as closed caption TVs, talking calculators,
2 plus 5 equals 7.
and the first version of the voice synthesizer.
This is the first version of my computer voice. It's what they call the beta.
Around this time, the Kurzweil reading machine was invented, and this was designed to read text from scanned documents in the 1970s. That's really cool. That's something that I took a long time to learn how to do with my modern day technology in school. So that's really neat. In 1978, the first Braille embosser was actually used with a computer. Now, many people don't realize this today, but you can actually use Braille with machines, smartphones, computers, tablets. They're all able to output into Braille using refreshable Braille displays. Similar to a Braille typewriter, a refreshable Braille display can actually pop up Braille letters and characters, and you can skim your finger through it. So it's text that's being either read aloud normally by a phone or computer using a screen reader, and then it's being converted to Braille for discrete reading, right? Those work today, and in 1978, there was a version of that working with an early computer. I'm just trying to get my head around that. That is so cool. In 2005, Apple introduced VoiceOver, a screen reader, into Mac OS X Tiger. Wow. There was an early version of this in Puma. It was codenamed something else, but essentially the first version of VoiceOver was released in 2005, and this was built into every Mac that you purchased. So you bought a computer, it's accessible for a person who's blind. Now, of course, this is an early version of it, so maybe not every application was fully compatible, but essentially at this point, blind people could surf the web out of the box with a computer with no third-party software. I remember being introduced to VoiceOver and Zoom back in maybe 2006? Could be 2005. It may have been really the first version. This was with my vision specialist at the time in elementary school. He brought a Mac in, showed me how this worked, and I'm like, wait. It was really neat because all I had at home was a Windows XP computer with like third-party software, and it worked, kinda. It was alright. So I would eventually get a Mac and learn Zoom and text-to-speech on it, and that would eventually allow me to edit video in a way that was very accessible for me. Speaking of 2009, the year that I bought my first Mac, Apple also introduced VoiceOver to the iPhone with iPhone OS 3 and the iPhone 3GS. And not just VoiceOver, but a full universal Zoom that could be used throughout any application. This, again, allowing people who are legally blind and people who are totally blind to use a smartphone. Something that many people still don't realize is a thing today. It is. Got a video on it. The innovation of assistive technology is all around us. It's something from glasses to magnifiers. I remember using these in school. I mean, still couldn't read. It made things bigger, but teachers didn't understand that the spectrum of blindness is very, very different for every person with different sorts of vision disabilities. So that really leads us to today. Technology has only really advanced even more. I mean, we have echolocation built into smartwatches that can then provide feedback of what is in front of me 15 feet away without sight. And it does that through vibrations. There's just so many cool things to really look back and recognize. This was a lot of fun to sort of learn a lot of the origins. It's really important to see how a lot of this technology and assistive tools have progressed over the years. Even though VoiceOver wasn't necessarily introduced publicly until 2005, the Macintosh back in 1984 was introduced to say hello, something that would allow people who are blind to be able to set up a computer with that same kind of technology all by themselves. The innovations from accessible technology, it has really pushed the boundaries of innovation, not only within tech, but everyday lives like in law and media. So I asked you over on Twitter, what are some questions you have for me for a video topic like this, going back and looking at assistive technology as sort of this broader topic in history.
How do you think your childhood would be different if you had access to today's assistive tech?
It's really hard to sort of look at all of that. That's quite a broad answer. I could really go into a lot of detail on a question like this. But one thing I will say is if I had a screen reader back when I was like first learning, like early elementary school, if I could have articles or books read to me on a tablet or a computer like that, I'd probably be a better reader. Not even a reader really, but just be more up to date and know where to go, what my resource was to obtain literature and information, right? Like written material, because I really did not have a whole lot of access to that. And I was put with expectations that I can obtain whatever information is given to me no matter how big they make the text, but it did not work that way for me.
How many times have you knocked over those little office trash cans with your cane? It happened to me so much I gave up and got a guide dog. But also, have you tried any of those laser cane things?
No, I have not tried any laser cane, but I actually changed how I use my cane depending on the environment that I'm in. I get a lot less aggressive with it, in a way. I use it a lot more cautiously when I'm indoors, when I'm in a space that I'm kind of unfamiliar with and that I know belongs to someone else, right? So if I'm in someone else's office or I'm in an office building I'm unfamiliar with, which is a public space, I'm typically not trying too hard to whack things around and try to knock over things. I'm very cautious around other people's things. It's just sometimes too cautious. I just don't want to break anything ever.
Favorite old school check? Mine was a typewriter. LOL, and a massive CCTV that the monitor was way above my head. LOL.
I know all about that CCTV. We had about 2 of them in the house. Keep in mind, my brother was also visually impaired, but those were cool. I didn't really use them for reading like they tried to make me do. The whole reading thing wasn't for me. It didn't work. But I would put my DS and my Game Boy under it, and I would turn my handheld games, such as Pokemon, that again I could take my time with. It was an RPG, turn-based, and I could actually make those on the big screen. In a way, it was a sort of a camera on a tray that was then displaying that video onto a bigger display. Then I could put filters on it to make it more accessible to my vision. Those are CCTVs for those who were unaware.
How far has technology come since you were a kid? What do you find more accessible, your cell phone or your computer? Do you have a favorite accessibility app?
So yes, things have come a long way since I was a kid. I mean, the smartphone itself, I think, has revolutionized so many different industries and our day-to-days, for better and for worse in some areas. But for me, I can get a ride to where I need to go, the pharmacy, just out to eat, just to see friends in a time that there wasn't a pandemic. Hopefully someone's watching this in the future and is like, well, what pandemic? But really, like, the smartphone, I think, has really mobilized accessibility. I have a magnifier, I have a literal CCTV in my pocket for a fraction of the cost. I can do so much more. I love my computer. I love the bigger display. I can edit video on it. But at the end of the day, smartphones are only getting more powerful and greater and really mobilize and allow me to travel, right? It's an accessible camera as well. It's a viewfinder that's full. Like, honestly, if I had no other technology and just a smartphone that was accessible for me, I think I could get by. It would be my everything. I would be a filmmaker still. I could edit video on it. The video may look different in terms of the final product, what I can do with like editing limitations, but at the end of the day, it's still, I think, the most accessible device that I have. And in terms of application, favorite accessibility app, that's always changing. I'm always sort of using different things. I think at the end of the day, it's always gonna be the camera app, the stock camera app of like my iPhone. But I do love checking out other accessibility apps, and seeing AI is really cool, and just seeing where artificial intelligence is moving and how that's being utilized to really help people who are blind find things on their own and identify what's around them. I think it's really neat.
How has technology changed? How have your needs changed?
So obviously we've talked a bit about how technology has changed, but how have my needs changed? That's a very interesting question, because I didn't know what I needed when I was a kid. I had so few options. And again, it was to really just cater to low vision. But again, that wasn't my need. I didn't just need to cater to low vision. I needed things that could adapt to total blindness when my eyes were too fatigued and honestly just can't make out the image in front of me, because that is the majority of my day. So my needs have changed, as in I recognize better and I know how to articulate what it is that I see and how I see, and I can illustrate that with filmmaking, which is one of my favorite things that I can do, and really help people see different, as in how I see visually and hopefully metaphorically in a way, cognitively. But again, I'm a white cane user now that has given me so much more independence. So I don't think my needs have ever really necessarily changed. It's just I didn't recognize what my needs were, and I wasn't ever catered to what my needs actually were as a kid. So hope that helps. Hope that answers that. I hope this video has been helpful to kind of give a little bit of my own perspective on how assistive technology has really given me independence in my adulthood as a person who is legally blind, as well as really illustrating where a lot of this came from, right? The white cane, where Braille was originated from. And the idea that Louis Braille believed that us people with disabilities deserve access, that accessibility is a human right, even back at a time when we were silenced, we weren't allowed to be within society, and we were just starting to get a little bit of taste, if you were privileged enough to have some access to literature and information, of course, what they wanted to feed to you. If you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and hit notifications if you want to see more videos like this in your subscription feed. If you do want to support me a little bit further, you can check out patreon.com/James Rath. If there was something new that you learned in this video, I'm curious, let me know down below in the comments. if maybe you didn't, I'd love to learn something new. Let me know something that I may not have already known around the idea and the concept of assistive technology. Comments are down there. I hope you could see something different today. I'll hear you next time. Bye.